right, welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Indimuli. Today is World Press Freedom Day. And joining us journalists of note or individuals in the media and in the media industry here in Kenya, who are going to help us with this discussion to understand what exactly we are celebrating as journalists as a media fraternity. Allow me to introduce them. From my immediate right, Ken Bosire from the Kenya Editors Guild, a journalist also. You've served in quite a number of media houses. It is a pleasure to have you at TV 47 this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Next to Bwana Bosire, we have Professor Nancy Buka, a media scholar. It is a pleasure to have a media scholar at TV 47 as we celebrate World Press Freedom Day.
Thank you for having me.
And last but definitely not least, Maina Mwiruri, immediate former chairman, Media Council of Kenya. It is good to have you in studio.
Thank you.
Now, if you look at the Daily Nation cartoon on page 18 this morning, it just has a title, World Press Freedom Day, and a caricature of journalists doing what they do best, collecting news. But we do have fingers that are not just pointing them or pointing at them, they're actually pressing them. And one wonders what the name press means in this instance. And probably let's start from there. Press, up to this day and age, still is a word used to describe a journalist. In the day, now we are in the multimedia and social media and artificial intelligence phase, and we're still calling ourselves press. Why is this, Bwana Maina?
There are some words which will never go away, traditionally, because they are entrenched. When you talk of press, it was the first medium. That's why it became press, the printing press. However, today now, it denotes everything: television, digital, electronic media, but it will always be the press, freedom of the press. But we know what it encompasses.
Okay.
It will never go away, and it's easier to put on a headline because it's short. Media now is wider than what we knew as media. It's already outside the boundaries. But when you talk of press, it implies the news media, basically like what you do when you are seated here. So the word will never go away, and it allows creativity, as you can see in that cartoon. It can even have two meanings. You are being pressed, and you are the press. It's a very clever cartoon.
Yes, so that's a cartoon on page 18 of the Daily Nation this morning. On page 14 of the Standard, we have an editorial comment talking about media freedom as a right. And they say that media freedom is a right, not state-given privilege. Professor Buka, one wonders why the media fraternity feels like we are constantly under threat. Many people look at the media and they see there's a very strong, powerful people, but anyone in the media is always complaining about being pressed, being oppressed, being denied this or the other, being in a very constricted environment. Why is that?
It comes with the territory. You know, when you are responsible for news and information, you know, for the public, or disseminating that to the public and sharing it, then you know, it doesn't come without the attendant risks. And you know, when you're holding the political class or the leaders accountable, you know, then you're likely to receive the sort of attention that that media gets. And I keep saying that, you know, the day that we will be praised as media for doing a good job by the political elite and those that are in positions of authority, then there'll be question marks. We have a larger obligation to serve public interest, to provide them with news and information, to ask the questions that nobody wants to ask, and to be able to hold not just the ruling elite, but also, you know, the public for leadership. The pressure is even more because they're doing that on behalf of the people and for the people, and somebody needs to be able to check on that, and that's where the role of the media comes in. So it's okay to be in the situation that we are in, where not everybody in society is going to be happy with what the media is doing, but if it is serving the public good for the greater number of people, then we continue doing what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Bwana Bosire, you've worked in quite a number of newsrooms, and you're a newsroom leader in your own right, and now serving with the Kenya Editors Guild. And as the professor talks about attendant risks, many people may want many people believe it's a very glamorous job, but there are risks involved. What kind of risks are there, probably in the Kenyan setup?
Yes, I think it's important to note that the position we hold in society, where we provide information, not just information, but we also educate people, ask the questions, hold everybody to account. Those risks are inherent. When you ask questions, some people are going to be uncomfortable. There is what we call physical safety. Mm-hmm. People are going to threaten you for exposing what they are not doing right. There are other things that are now come. Being in the front line, especially at a time like this, when in crisis, like the flooding that has, the guys are out there, there are physical threats. Some of them are traumatized, they witness all manner of things. So there are three very wide areas of what we think is a risk. The pressure on the physical world, because you've asked the uncomfortable questions. Today we are increasingly looking at what is the mental state, the psychosocial state of the person you send out. We send them to very areas where they witness very bad things, and yet they come back, and we don't step back to find out how they are processing them. There's a new threat that has come also that is called the cyber security. People are trolled, people are harassed online, all those things have come in. There is another threat that I think adaptation, embracing and adapting to new and changing environments. Mm-hmm. Constantly, job security is a big problem right now. People are going out without pay for long periods and are very, very, very stressful positions. So those are from mm-hmm. physical, psychosocial, and even the welfare itself within the newsrooms. That has changed a great deal now.
And just going by this commentary, the editorial on the Standard, and the first accusation against those who seek to stifle the freedom of the media goes probably to the authorities most of the times. But I've seen a trend that even the general public could also be accused of stifling media freedom to an extent. Case in point, my colleague journalist Larry Mado this past week has come under sharp criticism in social media. He's simply going around and reporting for his media house about the flooding situation in the country and some of the issues, including what's happening at the JKIA. But a lot of the criticism directed his way is that he's not patriotic, is that he's telling people bad stories about the country. That in itself is a risk for someone who's just doing their job, Bwana Mwiruri.
Media freedom, first I'll say it's the day celebrated yesterday is entrenched at the United Nations. Mm-hmm. That tells you how seriously it's taken by the global community, media freedom. Why is it taken so seriously? Because the threats are so many. Who do you threaten most of the time as the media? Who feels the threat? It's usually not the opposition, mm-hmm. because the media, since it's historical upcoming, media is called the fourth estate. It started during the French Revolution. It was like the opposition that has no name, but it became the fourth estate because it stands with the opposite, it's opposite of the government. Mm-hmm. So your most immediate enemy is usually the authority, because media speaks to power. When you see power going wrong, you speak, you write. When you see the floods, you don't just report the floods, you report the negligence, the lack of drainage. Mm-hmm. You are telling power, and they'll not be happy. Now, in media, we usually say the growth of media is directly proportional to growth of democracy. The more democratic a country is, the fewer the threats. Where media is oppressed most by the government, you will find now even wananchi also starting to take on media. Mm-hmm. And now, as my colleague Ken had said earlier, cyberbullying has become one of the biggest tools against the media now, because you are being attacked by anonymous people who have a lot of freedom to attack you. That's what has been happening to our colleague in CNN. I can tell you he's speaking the truth, but there is a kind of shame that comes when the truth is being exposed to the whole world. At Mai Mahiu, he stayed there for 2 days reporting what's happening in Mai Mahiu and showing this has been a time bomb waiting to happen. And finally it happened. So he's attacked both by the government, he's telling, and sometimes by the authorities on the ground near where that is happening. It's an existential threat that will not go away soon. Mm-hmm. And just to mention, this year, Kenya has gone back. 2023, we were rated below 100 in media freedom. Mm-hmm. Now, yesterday I saw we've moved back. We are in 160-something, telling you things are not getting better.
Despite the change in constitution, we should be enjoying relatively much better environment as a media. What went wrong? The laws protect freedom of speech and all this. What exactly is it? Where exactly is the disconnect?
You could attribute that to a number of factors, but I think before I get to that, I would just like to say that there is no deeper sense of patriotism than when you are asking the questions that everybody should be asking, or the questions on everybody's mind. And so we shouldn't look at some of the work that is being done by the likes of Larry Madowo as not being patriotic. I think the work that our media colleagues do speak to the deeper sense of patriotism that they have. Now, to the question around, what went wrong, I think there are several factors, that can be taken into account. I think there is a deeper sense of responsibility on media, and there are instances where perhaps we may have not done what we needed to do, where we have been unethical sometimes in the work that we're doing. And I know that because I served in the Media Complaints Commission until late last year. And so when people ask where is the media, we've seen that around, for example, the reportage of elections. And that's where sometimes it starts, and the trust then starts to fade away. But it's interesting that from the State of the Media report that was launched yesterday, there is still quite some significant trust in the media. So one, it is when the public perceives us as not asking the questions that we need to ask, then that trust fades. And so, we then become susceptible to attacks or criticism or, the sort of cyberbullying that then you see is attended to colleagues. But then the other challenge has got to do with the current realities within the media ecosystem. So when you have journalists or reporters who have not been paid, who don't know when their next paycheck is going to come, when the working conditions are not conducive in the newsroom, for some of the, Ken alluded to some of the risks, some of the risks around the stories that they cover. When you're sending journalists, for example, to cover the floods, what safety and protection measures have you put in place as a media house to guarantee their own security as they report, on what's happening in our society? So as frontline ambassadors, and I see journalists as frontline ambassadors because whenever there is anything that's happening, they're at the forefront of bringing that news and information to us. Have we, as media, introspected on how we are taking care of each other and how we are treating, our colleagues, even as they report that? So it creates a lot of despair. It also creates an environment that is not conducive for journalists to thrive. And so there are many who exit the newsroom, not because they're not passionate about what they're doing, but just because the working conditions are untenable. There are questions that, for us in training also need to ask ourselves. To what extent are we preparing, the future journalists or the current journalists to be able to respond to the current realities of what's happening and how the changes as a result of technology and the digital disruption are affecting the way that they do business. So in looking at what went wrong, and then of course looking at the laws that are in place and whether those laws actually guarantee, the freedom of the media, or they actually stifle, that freedom. So I think there's no one answer to it. I think it's important that all stakeholders come together and introspect and ask, are we actually, in the work that we do and in the contribution that we're making, are we contributing to media freedom? Are we not?
Are we consequential? And the other question that should be asked probably is, has the professional practice of journalism got it to a point where it's no longer affordable? Probably with the advent of new technology, artificial intelligence, bloggers are thriving, and media houses have reduced revenues. Has it become unaffordable for people to actually practice journalism professionally?
Yeah, thanks. Before I even respond, the story of Larry Madowo, I think, like Professor said, there's no greater attribution to patriotism than what he's doing. Does somebody stop to think that a guy leaves his house, for 3 days is out in the cold, facing all manner of risks? What greater patriotism can you exhibit than that? And I think that is exactly, and the question is, who is throwing these words at him? That's the question we should ask ourselves. And we now said behind, with the emergence of cyberbullying and everything and technology, who is hiding? Who are these faceless people who are driving this thing? We know people can drive agenda. So having said that, it's also important to note that the new landscape may appear as a threat, but it's not. I see opportunities in there. Yeah, that when you're talking about new players coming in, more people want to play in it. More people, we're getting up newer populations. In fact, from the status of the report, the status media report that was released yesterday, we have more players in the industry. We have more journalists who have been enlisted. More journalists have been trained. It's a growth, but how we look at it, it's also how we've been preset. We're using an old template to judge a new kind of stage. And that's where we are in that kind of intersection where we are saying, do we go left or right? But for me, the new, especially technology, is a friend to us. It has allowed more people to broadcast, more people to set up enterprises, media enterprises, given more people access to information, given us new tools of investigation. So I think in the way, who is asking, is it affordable? That is the question. But for me, from where I see it, I think it's an opportunity that we need to take, and begin to innovate more. I think innovation becomes the thing is. For example, the recent pronouncement with the PS that will only take advertising to one media house. That was unfortunate, but then it asks you, is that the only source of revenue that you can have? So the questions like Professor just mentioned, that we need to begin to think at this, framing this thing, when we are looking at the changes, internally and externally, what are we doing to adapt? Adaptation is the key word here. Okay. Because I think there are people today who are making loadfuls of cash, a lot of money from content creation. Do we begin to look at content as the thing that we have to sell to the people? Because people buy content and not just infrastructure.
Okay. And that's a temptation, because you go where the money is. Has media in Kenya been slow to transition to the new ways, that by sticking to the old way of doing it and getting to a level where that style of doing it has become unaffordable, then you find yourself stifling your own workspace?
I would not call it slow. I would say the infrastructure in which we exist may not have allowed us to move as fast as other dispensations where they have more resources. I'll give you an example of New York Times. Mm-hmm. They have gone completely paperless. They don't have a paper on the street. Mm-hmm. They are now selling all their content digitally. And I was reading a report, they have made as much money as they used to make when they were selling the newspaper on the street. And that's a big newspaper. In Kenya, we have seen that trend to go in that direction slowly because this paper is dying. This one, I don't know if 10 years down the line you will still go there and get the newspaper from the vendor there. So we have seen a lot of innovation into that direction. The big ones are trying now to go digital. However, the space in which we exist, the economy, the struggles in making ends meet for every media house may stifle that. But that's not to say we've been slow. There is hope. As my colleague Ken is saying, there's a lot of hope. And as he said, we should move away from using the old template to deal with something very new, which is full of disruptions. Me and Ken, when we were employed in the 90s, it was only the newspaper. We did not even have typewriters in the newsroom. And the newspaper came out and sold 90,000 copies
a day.
And that was just a standard, yeah. Nation was in the one something, sometimes 180,000 a day. Newspaper only. Today, everybody is down. Even this survey you saw yesterday, if you count the numbers, you'll be shocked. Even doing your eye survey, when you walk down Moi Avenue, look at the old vendors you used to see there. If you woke up early in the morning at 5, you used to see vendors carrying heavy sacks full of newspaper. These days, the vehicle just goes throwing a few bunches. So we are being pushed out of the old technology, the old template, and being pushed to survive. You must evolve into very innovative ways. That is the only way for the future of these media houses.
And this is a pronouncement by the government on how it is going to conduct its media spend, and only direct it's that MyGov pull out one daily. The kind of reception that we've seen from generally the other media houses that did not get to benefit was a lot of discomfort. And the paper that benefited from this, which is the Star, because it's obvious, and the MyGov is only available on the Star on Tuesdays every week. A lot could be said about how they've had to adjust even their reporting. Let me use this Tuesday, for example. Tuesday came a day after the Mai Mahiu tragedy. And all the dailies talked about, and I have copies, unfortunately we do not have them up, but the Daily Nation went with Black Monday and images of what happened in Mai Mahiu. I think Taifa Leo, mafuriko ya mauti, just images of what happened there. And the Standard, deluge of death, same thing. The People Daily, floods kill 91, and gory images of what happened there. But now you take a look at what the Star decided to go with that day. On the top, the main headline is Doomed Chopper Propeller Linked to Ogola's Death. That's a big headline. On the bottom, we have an image of ODM bigwigs as a party leader and his 2 deputies. And it was a file picture. It was not even a picture from that day. ODM bigwigs seek to influence grassroots elections. And on the front page, there was no mention of this flooding situation at all. And one wonders, does this kind of government spend affect the media that will become captives of that kind of spending by government, that you could clearly see for a newsroom to decide to go with a totally different kind of headline? There must have been a lot of influence.
I mean, absolutely. When you have, that sort of government spend coming your way, it's going to influence how you report. I think we need to appreciate that the role of media is larger than, serving the interests of a particular government or a particular dispensation. And it's questions like what you're asking, it is headlines or reportage like what you're mentioning, that then raise questions about the credibility of the media. So whereas the publication might get away with it now because of the government spend that they're attracting, they have a larger obligation, and that is to serve public interest. And so tomorrow, when people do not read it or do not consume it, it's because of the feeling that when it mattered to us the most, you did not cover the issues as we wanted them covered. And I know it's not easy for the editorial leadership in making some of those decisions and trying to find a balance, but appreciating that the reason why we exist as media is because we are serving public interest, and the public should be front and center of a lot of the decisions that we are making. Granted, we know that doesn't happen all the time. There are business interests that then would curtail, the other interests that the media seeks to, that the media seeks to serve. And I think as Maina was talking about, changing the way that we do business and the way that we report and how we package, I think one thing that is consistent is that the principles and the tenets of good journalism, cannot be downplayed. A good story is a good story, whether it is published on a print newspaper or it is put behind a paywall on your, a digital device, or it is, shared on social media platforms. And I think what's critical is for us to realize that whereas the platforms of dissemination have changed, people will still look for news and information, and they want to access it.
Okay.
So I don't buy the newspaper, I'm able to access it online, but that's not even the first place that I go in the morning. Mm-hmm. I go on X and I want to find out, what are the what are the trends? What's Nation saying on their X, whatever? What's the Standard saying? What are all these media houses saying on their social media platforms? What are the big stories that I should go after, or I should read? So the tenets of good journalism will not change. Okay. What has happened is that I think we have tended to look at models that have worked in other jurisdictions and brought them home and imagined that they would work, The State of the Media report, which was launched yesterday, is consistent with a lot of other reports that have been launched or that have been shared. We assume that because the newspaper circulation figures are dwindling, that people do not access news and information. They're accessing that news and information in all manner of platforms. They're accessing it on their WhatsApp platforms, and some of that information, if we are not there where people are as journalists, then they have a lot of misinformation, because in those spaces, people can share whatever information that they want to share, factual or false, as you'd call it. So it's going to the places where we are and then thinking innovatively about how we then, finance the news operations.
Finance is a key issue here. Yes. This business has to be sustained, and one may blame the Star, but they need the money. And the government has been the biggest revenue stream for media houses for so many decades. That model in itself appears to be part of the problem, that when the government decides to pull out, then a lot of media houses are left struggling, and some media houses appear to be giving in and almost falling captive to some of this. Do you think that probably that's where the media missed the point in Kenya's perspective, that depending too much on the government, which is also accused of infringing on the freedom of the media?
Yes, I think what is important, what Professor has just mentioned about plurality of platforms. I don't have to go, I can access information from very many channels because of the digital kind of dividend that we are reaping now. And I think that's one of the things. But most importantly, I just want to mention about how a resource to media is not just money. The resource is money, but also a resource is the personnel. How well equipped? How have you taken care of the people who are going out to do these things? You can get all the money in the world, but you don't deploy it properly so that you're in motivating your staff to go out and look for these stories. But mine and I worked in a newspaper, even you, in an organization that was also controlled by the people who controlled the levers of power. But there's one thing that doesn't change, the practice of journalism. Whether you are working in any place, you must remain true to your calling.
Even without the money?
Even without the money. Sometimes the money, like I've just mentioned, is sometimes not the only determinant. You have something that you stand for. But a fact like the flooding, you can never change it. It's a fact, it was flooding, people died, there was tragedy, there was crisis out of it. I keep telling people, facts can never walk on their heads. They will remain facts, and they will stare back at you. You can imagine if I was the editor, I walked in the newsroom and I don't have this on page 1. My day will be ruined. Do I call myself a journalist that day again? So, responsibility, sensitivity in the way you frame the story does not mean that you ignore the story. In fact, I was just looking at some of the concerns of the media that emerged from the report yesterday. There is an element of disinformation, malinformation. That was top, because people didn't think that the information we give them, is it right? But there is one thing that came out, lack of diversity. The generic nature in which we cover news. You go from one channel, one newspaper, it's just the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's because we are stuck to the old model of things. There's been a shift in the way we don't no longer sit in the newsroom and determine what is good for our audience. Okay. That has changed. The audience will tell you, this is what I want, this is where I want to consume it, and this is the way it is. There's a closer relationship between the audience and us as journalists. So we have to have a constant conversation about what is working. And that's where now we go through all these things and say, what are people speaking to us? When I go on social media, what are the concerns? Can I put fact? Can I verify it and package it and take the story ahead? So that conversation, the practice of journalism and our business models, they have to find a place where they strike a balance so that we don't take our audience for granted.
Right. Time now for us to take a break. We continue this conversation after the break. Today, being World Press Freedom Day, we continue examining the space of the media in a changing environment. You're watching Morning Cafe.
Insurance awareness with Insurance Regulatory Authority. It is any parent's joy to know that their child's education in future is secured. Education costs are increasingly expensive, while the future is filled with uncertainties. Take an education insurance policy today to assure your child's education in future in case of death or permanent disability. Your education policy remains valid. No further premiums are payable, and your child's education is assured. Read and understand the terms and conditions of your policy. This message is brought to you by IRA.
Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Ndimuli. We continue with this conversation on World Press Freedom Day, looking at the space that the media occupies in a changing environment. I'm still in studio with Ken Busira from the Kenya Editors Guild, Professor Nancy Buka, who's a media scholar, and Maina Mwirore, immediate former chairperson, Media Council of Kenya. And when I'm Mwirore, we're just looking at what happened on Tuesday with that headline on the front page of the Star, vis-a-vis what was happening in the country, because this was the main news, and it was not just normal reporting. A tragedy had happened, and every Kenyan's focus was on that. And then they decide to go with something else totally on a day when we know that the government spend is on them with the MyGov pullout or that daily.
Without going into direct, complete reference, because we do not know 100% what happened on the editorial tables, and we have many editorial tables in this town. Everybody decides the way to go. And many things, I've been an editor. I was a managing editor of the People Daily. And many things inform the way an editor will go. I have a lot of experience. Me and Ken Busira, we've worked together since we were boys.
Would one of those things be money?
Not necessarily. It could be, you see, what you see is what the editor brings out, but you don't know what's behind the editor. The editor is the front of a lot of other influences that affect that media house. First, I'll give you just two examples. And there's an old saying that came from Britain, where there was I think he's still there, Murdoch, the owner of some of the biggest titles in Britain. And it was said of him, the freedom of the media belongs to the owner. Okay. Look at America. Fox supports one side, CNN, one side. It's global. It's the interests sometimes of the owner or of the funder or of just the editor. The editor may just decide. It cannot be conclusive, but it can be inferred. You can clearly see something happened here, as you are saying of the coverage on page 1 that day. Something happened here. It's a matter of conjecture. Why didn't they go this way? You can only guess. However, I'll tell you, a new trend is emerging, where in the Media Council, I was there with the professor. In the Media Council, we started studying a concept called, you remember this thing we used to talk about, media capture. Media capture by commercial forces. Commercial forces can now have a big leeway in what you will write tomorrow and what you will broadcast. One time when we did that study, there was a big breakdown of bank services, the ATMs. That story never saw the light of day in any of the newspapers. Because if you do it, the particular bank affected is the biggest spender in every media. How come nobody wrote about it? These are the same things we are talking about. Another time, some of the biggest mobile telephony companies, I'm speaking in the plural, have been having a lot of leeway. A day like yesterday, you could see half of fibers were not working. Look at it in the newspapers and show me.
Nowhere.
It's nowhere.
Yes, yes.
There's something now being called commercial capture. It will not end because we are talking finance. Will you carry this story and avoid 100 million? You run it then and pay yourself 100 million. It's an example. I'm not saying it's a fact. So that's why I'm telling you, where an editor sits, so many forces come into play. You may not even blame the editor. But there are many things now influencing editors than what used to influence editors during our time. Those days you could write anything and go home. Okay. And we had no mobile phones. You just go home until tomorrow.
And that's the crux of the matter, Professor. Do you agree with that statement that freedom of the press belongs only to the owner?
The freedom of the press actually belongs to the people and not the owner. And Maina is being quite gentle, or even in the days when he was in the newsroom, that commercial capture was there. It's just that it was not as overt as we see it today. And two, you also are operating in a context where the audience is quite, you have a very active consumer who's able to see, in between and read in between the lines. This consumer has very many options, so they are able to compare and deduce for themselves what might be, what might be going on. In the days when Maina was in the newsroom, maybe the public didn't have that advantage of being able to compare what different media houses were saying or doing. So that commercial capture has always been there. It's just that I think we see it a lot more overtly now, and that's because the struggles that are happening within the media space. That freedom, going back to the question around where that freedom sits, it actually sits with the people, because media exists to serve the public interest. The public is usually very unforgiving. And as Maina said, that whereas, we are not at the editorial decision-making table, at the end of the day, it's a public perception. When we're looking at the state of the media in this country, we didn't go to ask the editors. There may be questions there that we're looking at, what do editors think? But a lot of it went back to the audience consumer. How do they perceive the media? What platforms are they on? What are the reasons why they're attending to those platforms? So the consumer has a lot to do with the media perception, has a lot to do with where attention will go to. There's been a lot around, for example, the work that John Allen Namu did with the fertile deception. And the sort of traction that got on social media, the number of followers that Africa Uncensored, for example, now has, is much higher, because society feels that they're asking the questions that concern them. So we may be comfortable right now because as an organization, as a media house, thinking that because of these commercial interests, that is where we need to focus on. But I think the greater good is public interest and serving the public, who you will need, to be able to sustain your business. Yeah.
The environment has changed, especially with the growth of technology. And you have served in the newsroom alongside Bwana Mwirure from the 90s, even before the advent of computers and the internet. And now we're seeing that this has really moved, and now we're talking about artificial intelligence. And one wonders how much of a threat this could be when you're looking at press freedom, given the fact that a lot of this data, some of it is generated by machines and without human intervention. Do you see a risk in that?
It's important that what we just, Maina and Prof just spoke about, public interest. That freedom sits with the people. Even the people in authority are answerable to the citizen. And we all have one common person. The people in power, their power stems from the people. Us as the media, our own people, our audience, our target is that. So that trust. From yesterday's report, I saw it has gone down a little, but people still trust the media. They still trust us to tell them the right thing, to inform, give them the right stuff. So what has happened in this new shift to technology? I see, like I did mention before, that it is an opportunity. It is more is demanded from us as professionals. Technology is a tool. AI is a tool for us to use, because at every intersection there will be a human intervention. It can never be let on its own. It's how we use it. But most importantly, this technology, it calls on us to ensure that we are better trained in terms of how you use it. For example, a lot of data, a lot of what is fed into the AI kind of system is information and software from the global north. Do we have it? Have we domesticated it? Where is our place of innovation to try and get it back to ourselves, so that when we are talking about using it, is it serving us or is already pre-tuned to other people? That training, that is for me is an opportunity in the industry that calls for us to get more innovators, people who are creators into the industry. But again, at our level of training, we are going to have to train ourselves in terms of more verification desks, people to verify that what we are feeding out people there. Do we have a new structure that has now come into the information system, in the dissemination and gathering, in verification and fact-checking. That is going to be very, very important for us because it comes, we have to adapt and say, everything that comes to us, how has it been done? Can we find the background? What was it? What was fed into it? Because we are talking about data again. What are we giving it? There was a very interesting thing during the editors' convention last year when the use of AI, it was said, it was given an instruction to generate an image of an African doctor holding a Caucasian child. What came out was very interesting. It was a witch doctor, a sangoma, because in the AI training, a doctor in Africa is a witch. It's a witch, a sangoma holding a Caucasian child. So how do we begin now to get this technology to contextualize it, to work for us? These are opportunities. And I think for me, and when we are talking about media, there is a whole new creation that we have to look at. There is the demographic, who is feeding, who is getting into it. So we have more people coming in, innovate, adapt, and domesticate and use it for ourselves. Because technology for me, in short, is going to be a tool for us. It's made our work more efficient. We can do it faster. What I could turn around instead of going to the library to flip through hard copy, I can now get it at the tap of a button. Yes. I get that background I need. I need something about professor, I'll just get it all aggregated in 10 seconds. So in the old days, mine would go with a notebook to the library to start, give me a file of professor, they start writing the notes and come typing. Efficiency, turnaround times, that's what technology does for us.
And of course, even when the internet came in, there was a lot of reluctance to actually go that direction. We're seeing the same reluctance right now. And many newsrooms say AI is actually not welcome here. And one wonders, that reluctance will not necessarily change the facts. AI is here with us.
AI is here with us. And it's one of those things you say, an idea whose time has come. Nothing can stop it. It's a future. It will never go away. Indeed, the best now you can do with AI is enter into that space and try to regulate it. Governments are already doing that, are beginning to think on how to regulate AI. Universities, how to deal with it. Because Prof, maybe you will also let her comment on that and tell us how it's affecting she's one of the elite universities in Kenya. Is it affecting acquisition of knowledge? How will you know this person has not read this story on AI and decided to type it with their own words? They have ways of finding out that. However, for media, it's a big opportunity. I would, the sooner you start looking at it as an opportunity, the better. As you're saying earlier, as the internet started coming in, it was reluctantly accepted. But today there are no libraries now. In a library used to be as big as this studio, the library where we used to work. You could walk in and keep walking for 2-3 minutes. You're in the library looking for one file. Once you get that file, you spend with it like 4 hours. You can't imagine now how life has changed. AI now has taken it to the next level. And it's not the last frontier. I think more things are coming with the speed of change, as you can see. So what it does is it makes acquisition of information very fast. It helps you to perfect. It helps you to see others' ideas very quickly. Like earlier you asked, can journalism survive without finance? Maybe you should also have asked, can journalists survive without finance? One of the things I'm doing, the veterans like me and Ken are doing now, we've started new hustles that you youngsters do not know yet. we discovered that there are more journalists out here in the rain than in the newsroom. Retrenched, fired, there are so many. Many doing nothing, you can never even tell this guy was a journalist. So we are doing a kind of training where we are teaching them that you can survive on your own by being creative. Yes, you can survive by being creative. We are teaching them, we are doing so many trainings on that angle to teach them to live again on your own, produce your own content, look for a channel to bring it out. And it's happening a lot. And those who find their niche are doing well. You can see there are so many people doing YouTube now. Podcast is becoming a big thing in big countries like the US. It's coming here also.
And that is freedom in itself.
That's what we are teaching them, yes. And there nobody controls you. All we are teaching them is don't go the bad way. Stick within parameters. Stick within code of conduct for media practice. Stick within clean content. There is more to make within parameters than going the wrong way of dirty content. There is space and there is money to be made even when outside the newsroom. That's what we are teaching them.
Professor, on this issue of AI, what's your take?
So I was just looking at a tweet that I posted about 2 weeks ago when we were hosting the Digital Transformation Conference at the Aga Khan University. And I said, AI will not take away your job. Somebody who knows, or someone who knows how to use AI will, you know. And essentially what I was trying to say in a nutshell is that we have to embrace technology. We have to embrace the different tools that help us tell our stories. And it's important that we prepare our journalists, our students to be able to to use AI for the work that they're doing. I think there's something that Ken said about the data. That's an opportunity for us in the African continent to be able to influence, the output by ensuring that that data is accessible. When you go into AI, a lot of what you get is foreign content. Even when you ask it, and it's good to, one of the things that we do at the school is we actually allow our students to use it, and they're able to see the limitations of it. If you ask AI about your village, they have no idea where that is, okay? And they will ask you, could you describe it a little more? And it will, even with that, it will tell you, no. And then it might give you a comparison of another village in, a Western world that seems to have similar characteristics. So it's knowing how to use it, and it's also knowing the limitations that it presents, because there are things that it cannot do just yet, and that's an important consideration. But there's also a lot of good that AI enables us to do. I think I've seen stories, and the media houses will actually say, some of these pictures were AI generated, or we used AI tools to be able to authenticate, whether these were armed bandits or just people taking care of their livestock. I think there was a story that was done by The Nation when people were asking, are these bandits, are these terrorists, who are these people? I think it was in a place called Kaimuk, and they used AI tools to be able to tell what time of the day those people were actually walking in the area. What was the position of the sun vis-a-vis where they were? What sort of guns were they? Were these AK-47s or were they G3s? So the various ways in which you can leverage AI to help in telling a complete story. But the important thing is knowing how to use it, knowing that it has limitations. And I know that there are media houses that have started coming up with policies. I know Media Council is coming up with some guidelines, but internally media houses are also coming up with policies that then help journalists to be able to use to use AI. So interrogating, verifying, ensuring that there is data that's available, doing research that then provides the data that then would support AI or sustain AI in our context.
And I can see our time is up, so I'll give you each a few seconds to give you a parting shot.
I just wanted to mention something very briefly on AI. I sat in the committee at the MCK that is trying to create guidelines on its use. But the larger body at national policy, the government does not have that policy. So regulation is important. Other country, Kenya is behind, it's trying to catch up. I don't know whether we have already started on crafting a national policy on the use of AI. There's also something that speaks to academy, which Professor Nancy was alluding to, that even at the academy, the way they're going to tweak their training, do they train journalists in that use of technology as they come into the newsroom? That is going to be another discussion. 2, how do we adapt it within the newsroom? Those are discussions. But the way AI has been with us for all, if you type your phone, even that first thing telling you about spell check, that is still the technology. We are all using it, but how do we get the particular thing that works in our newsroom? So the thing is, World Freedom Day gives us a chance to step back and introspect and look at what are the opportunities and what are the limitations. And in here, there's one constant. The practice of journalism remains constant. We have only to know it can never change. It can only adapt to new systems and the way we serve society. And it's important that everything else will keep evolving, but our key tenets of being journalists and professionals will stand out. There will be risks, but those risks should not drive us out of business, but it's part of our territory that we have to walk into.
Thank you. Bwana
As a media trainer and having been a regulator as the Media Council chairman, I would like to speak hope to journalism. You asked earlier where the profession is going. There is a lot of hope. We are in a better space than we were during our times. Universities are many now teaching journalism. Institutions that our day, you could be surprised, there was only one diploma college for government and one school of journalism in Nairobi. Now there are many places to train. Come out. The profession is still beautiful. Okay. And it's a job you love. When you love it, you can do it. Do not look at the doom side. The gloom is a lot also. No money, no salaries. Forget that language. You have the potential. You've been trained. You know the job. You can do it even on your own. So there is future. There is hope. And Kenya is the leading one in this region. I think even Africa now, we're in the range of South Africa. Okay. Let's utilize it. There's hope.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Mwiruri, and finally, Professor Buka.
Thank you. So the theme of this year's World Press Freedom Day is a press for the planet. Of course, looking at the environmental crisis that the world is facing. And I think that alone should give so much hope to the media fraternity. Media is the go-to place when people are unable to make decisions about their lives. What's going on currently in the country, with all the flash floods, where do we go for that news information to be able to even know which route should I take this morning? I was asking Maina how he got here, because I think I have an idea of where he stays, and whether the roads were flooded. And you go to the media, you go to for credible news information, and you're going to credible sites, to be able to make decisions about your lives. We saw that during COVID, another crisis. And so there is hope in media. I think what is required is for all stakeholders to sit around a table and ask ourselves, how do we sustain this noble profession that is out to serve public interest and that helps people make informed decisions about their lives. And that sustainability does not have to be from one place that we have always imagined is a place, not government. There are many, many ways of sustaining the media business.
Okay.
We just need to come together.
Asante sana, Professor Nancy Buka, media scholar. Ken Busire from the Kenya Editors Guild, and Maina Mwiruri, immediate former chairperson, Media Council of Kenya. Our panelists this morning as we take a look at the World Press Freedom Day. Yes, it is being marked today, and yes, journalists around the globe have something to look forward to as we introspect into the space we currently occupy in a changing environment. Thank you so much. Today it is Feel Good Friday right here on Morning Cafe, so don't go